For you Ethicuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, what the heck's the matter with you? Welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. We got a super special episode today. We're going to finish up our benchmark presentation. But before we dive in, we have the one and only Chase, the man behind the scenes, the Chase of Spades. It's his birthday, so let's give a big round of applause. Here's Chase over here. Happy birthday to Chase. How's it going? Okay, we're back at it. We might need to recenter this. Sorry about that. All right, so we're round of applause for Chase. He is the man that makes this happen, along with Joa and others on the and Selena and other folks on the Ethico marketing team. We're about to dive right in. Before we dive in, drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat, like we say every single week, and I'm going to keep saying it till it's not true. Your network is your net worth. Neither one are big enough. You got to use it. You have to take advantage of this special thing that we are all a part of. This industry is so unique and so special. And, this is our time every single week to lift our heads up from our corner of the world, which sometimes can feel lonely. Sometimes you feel like you're crazy, and get together with other people that are wired the same way, that look at the world the same way, and are trying to have a similar impact together. So we're going to dive right in. I'm Nick. Springtime's here. My silver suit is back out. And we got the one and only Gio Gallo, my brother, mentor, best friend, and partner. What's up, Gio?
Hey, glad to be here. Let's learn, guys.
Let's learn. Okay. Before we get into it, so our good friends over at Rethink Compliance are putting together this really cool benchmark report about programs. Go ahead and scan this QR code right now. And Joa, if you can, maybe drop into the chat the link for it in case people are still using flip phones or Nokias or something. Hit this thing. It takes 5 minutes to go ahead and fill this out, and then you'll get access to the results. Remember, part of this thing is we're part of a community, and it's our contributions and it's our sharing of knowledge and tactics and wisdom and so forth that really helps make our collective impact so much bigger. So really do this if you care about ethics, compliance, if you care about the world. Fill this out, okay? I'm going to leave this up for a quick sec. 1, 2, 3. If anybody wants that, we'll send it around in the follow-up. It's our 2024 benchmark report. People are loving it. I'm getting texts throughout the night. I'm getting posts on LinkedIn about it. There's apparently a lot of great stuff in it. So we are also going to continue to push my new favorite book from my good friend, Allison Taylor. We're giving away 10 of these today because we love you so much. And it's benchmark time. So 10 of these are coming out for the best tips in the chat, the best conversations in the chat. I got tipped off by our good friend Wendy about a new cool integrity book that we're going to be meeting the gentleman who wrote it and adding that as well. So keep participating. More participation drives more chances to win. And then we're also going to be giving away 5 custom benchmark reports. We give these away to clients and Ethicsverse folks. So if you would like a custom benchmark report, go ahead and drop a 1 in the chat now, and we will reach out to you on that. We basically take your data, we put it against the most recent data, both from the NavX report, from the Ethico report, and give you some tips on how you might want to move those numbers and some actionable steps to adjust some of those KPIs that you're being judged on. Okay. And then I haven't told anybody about this yet, but I would like to get some feedback from our audience about how the Ethicsverse can be better. So if you would like to be part of this, I'd like to send around a survey and maybe set up a little roundtable to get some feedback. We take very seriously the hour that you guys spend with us every single week. This has to be a valuable time for you. You should leave this feeling like, wow, that was a shot in the arm, or wow, that was a great perspective, or that was a great idea that I can implement into my thing immediately. We want to keep making this better. So drop a 0 in the chat if you'd like to be part of that thing, and we'll set up, we'll add you to the list of people that get the survey and invite you to a little roundtable where we can really kind of optimize this thing and add some more value. Okay. Up to 600 already, Chase, for the big birthday boy. Okay, 619. Okay, so let's dive in. Last time we covered the first 4: issue days open, issue anonymity, reporting channels, and issue categories. We're going to blast through these last 6 today. Severity. We're going to talk about substantiation. We're going to talk about different reporter types. How are people finding out? Reporter awareness, issue sequence. What's the mix between follow-ups and original cases? And finally, average reports per 100. That some people argue is the granddaddy. What's your true reporting rate? Before we dive into those, though, I'm going to take 10 quick minutes to kind of run through these first 4 in case you missed the first episode, in case you haven't seen that on YouTube or whatever. We're going to run through these first 4 in 10 minutes, and then we're going to dive into the back 5. So URLs are in the chat. You guys are all connecting. You're making a bunch of new friends. Someone put 100 in the chat, so they're going to get something. They're going to get 100 of something. And somebody said it's their favorite part of the week. I can't imagine how it can be better. Love you. Thank you so much. That's great. It can always be better. We can always make it better. So Appreciate that encouragement. I got to tell you though, sidebar, I got so much, I'm kind of coming out of this like spring conference season. I've been to so many of these conferences, 3 or 4 over the last month or so. And the amount of feedback and kind words that I've heard from folks about the Ethicsverse and how encouraging it is, it's really encouraging to me, and it's really encouraging to our team. This feels like this is our thing. This is our place to meet, and it's really helped me to hear those things, and I really appreciate it. So if there's things you love about the Ethicsverse, I'd love to hear them, and I'd love to hear how we can make things better. Okay. Love Fest over. Just kidding. Love Fest just getting going. Let's dive in first and foremost to this executive summary. So I said this last time, but the big story here is, what's our job? Our job is to crowdsource risk intelligence at scale and provide insights back to the point of risk. The problem is most teams are only getting a fraction of the risk intelligence that exists within their organization. How can we optimize our systems, be more influential, be more persuasive, and get more buy-in from the human sensors that have this risk intelligence, so that we can do something about it, right? We're only getting a fraction of it. And today, more than ever, employees care about having a voice, having that belonging, and being a part of the collective that they are, a member of. The key is leveraging middle management. So throughout the presentation, and also in the chat, please share how you've, I've heard so many great ideas over the last couple of weeks about how people are really grabbing hold of this middle management opportunity. So if you have some of those tips, please drop those in. We'll try to interweave them into the conversation across these various metrics. But we're at a tipping point in our industry. We really are. And it's going to be up to us what our future reality looks like. Is it going to be more of the same, or is it going to be, is it going to get better? Is it going to get more impactful? Is it going to get bigger? It's going to take us working together on it and trying new things, new tweaks to our mindset, new tweaks to our process to drive those new results. Sidebar, before I get in, I wanted to share with everybody, I got invited on, a round of applause for me, I got invited on my favorite podcast, the Great Women in Compliance podcast. So if you haven't checked that out yet, check out the episode that just came out yesterday with me and Lisa. I put that thing in your rotation, not just my episode, of course. You are welcome to listen to it on repeat, of course, but put that in your rotation. It's a phenomenal podcast, and I just can't say enough good about Lisa and Hema and all the folks that are behind that. Okay, case closure time, let's get moving. Case closure time went up about a half day, rounding up to 23 days last year compared to the status quo of 44 days, which is about 50% lower. Our key is we want to close cases as fast as possible, but no faster. We don't want to ever shortchange our process. We want to have consistent process adherence. We want to reduce our cognitive load by utilizing our software and utilizing the things that are in place. And we want to drive as many reports as possible into this 0 to 30-day bucket. But again, we're always going to have cases that are aged longer, right? So there's the more complex cases, the things that take a long time, those are naturally going to take a long time. But if we can shoot for an average of 30 days and really kind of maximize this bucket on the left, that's going to be the best thing for us. And so the key to doing that is to analyze your investigation process, your intake process, your corrective action process as exactly what it is, a business process, a series of steps, a series of steps in a recipe, and look for bottlenecks. Where are points where reports or investigations are being held up, and analyze those specific choke points for optimization opportunities. The people on the front line might have some ideas. There might be a feature set in your tool, or there might be another tool out there that can really, loosen those things up. And our job to optimize the system is to identify bottlenecks, optimize those bottlenecks, and then find the next bottleneck. Just like optimizing a system is an iterative process, optimizing your entire program is an iterative process. You're on a compliance journey, and just get into that incremental mode of making small improvements that are going to stack up and multiply over time. All right, Gio, blast us through anonymity. How's this pace, guys? Good? Too fast? Let me know.
Yeah, we're going here. So issue anonymity, what is this telling you? This is telling you, among other things, how comfortable people are engaging with your process. The less comfortable people are, the more they're going to say, actually, don't put my name in it. And, part of what we talk about is as that confidence gets lower and lower, people are going to not even report at all. So as you're building a better system, better engagement across your organization, you should see you hold your total number of rate of reports where it is, and this issue anonymity come down. And you'll see here that these top kind of grayed out bars is the anonymous percentage, and we've seen that people on our Ethico's ecosystem, on our case management platform, have been seeing incremental improvement from 39% anonymous in 2018 to an average of 28% anonymous, over 10% drop in that over time. And, part of this benchmarking report is a sorting function of where are things now? Where were they before? How are they going? And what does that tell me? And what should I do? And if you are your psychological safety, increasing engagement, cycling things back into your broader employee base about how dependable and safe this process is, you should see a greater proportion of people saying, you know what, put my name on it. I'm confident that I'm not going to get retaliated against, and that the compliance and ethics team is going to honor my confidentiality without me removing my name from it. And then that's going to cycle back into your case closure time, because, if you can follow up and get more information and stuff, you should be able to get through that investigation faster. So, we'll see here that as we would predict, anonymity rate on the right side here varies across categories, right? So some things that are riskier, more concerning, that employees might not want to be too close with, they're probably going to be more prone to not identifying themselves. And then on the left side here, we see some difference in proportion of identified versus anonymous across different that's going to affect your case closure time, and that's also going to be different across the channel that things come in on. So there's a lot going on in that left side there, and I'd encourage you, if you're looking for a takeaway here, look at this slide 18 in this presentation, and think about how do your numbers compare to these, because there are three different data points playing off of each other there that can help indicate some hot spots in areas for improvement for you and your team. And I encourage you guys to not just look at this whole benchmark report as a task and an assignment of, hey, we got to get better at these things. Like we said earlier, it can always be better. Even the Ethicsverse can be better, and your program can be better as well. But in addition to that, try to find some things to celebrate here. There's a lot that we do as E&C professionals that's focused on risk, that's focused on defense, that's focused on, hey, how do we get better? We're all inclined to improve ourselves, our team, and our culture. But also make sure you're taking time to celebrate some things. If you have time series data, realize that I'm sure there are some things that you should talk to your team about, or even talk more broadly across your organization about, hey, you know what, we're getting better, and these things are getting better, and these things we're going to focus on a little bit more. Make sure you don't just get lost in the improvement zone.
And so the key to anonymity rate is what?
So the key is that this is a great barometer of your speak up culture, and how comfortable people are engaging with your reporting process. And one of the great takeaways to drive improvement in your culture is provide different anonymity options. You want to try to incrementally reduce that anonymity over time by building trust and demonstrating positive outcomes. Again, on that celebrating tip, you should be celebrating, hey, you know what, we got back to you, or we solved this thing, or here's a blinded example of someone who reported that helped us all build a better culture. Make sure that you're demonstrating those positive outcomes. And one of the ways to do that is taking a look at how you offer anonymity right now, how you explain it, what they can do, what their options are, because as you improve that, you're probably going to build trust in your program, and that's one way that you can drive your anonymity rate down.
Great. Reporting channels. So this is going to give you a mix of both our overall reporting rate, 3.6 reports per 100, 1.5 on the status quo, and you can see the split out across the main three channels here, right? Web is on top in purple, in office, in person, reports to managers is in blue, and finally hotline is in that kind of seafoam green below. Okay, so let's start bottom and let's go up. So hotline still remains a major channel, despite the drop and reversion a little bit below the historical norms pre-COVID. Some things people just want to talk to another human being about, and there's a lot of opportunity there to optimize that process and it be a true extension of the type of, a true extension of your team and a creation of a, dining experience or a customer experience that is in line with the type of organization you are trying to build. So optimizing that intake can do a lot to drive your case closure time down if you're getting better information off the jump. The middle layer is what I kind of talked about in the executive summary when we framed out this conversation. This is our battleground. If you're going to elevate to an organization where all the light bulbs are on at the top and they see ethics and compliance for this strategic lever that it could be, this circulatory system for the organization that's getting risk intelligence, providing these insights back, that's only going to be achieved if you can activate this middle manager layer. And we're working on a white paper and a and a full toolkit to activate middle managers, because it's a really massive needle mover, a huge point of leverage that can really swing not just the effectiveness of your job, but also the perception of your organization within your company. Finally, the web. We've seen an increase in this over the years. It's coincided with upgrades to that web experience. We want to try to balance both ends of it. On the one end, you have a single box, tell me what happened, friend. And on the other end, you have a massive complex form that gets filled out that has a higher abandonment rate, right? You got to have some kind of a balance in the middle. And what we found that works is a simple form that has branching logic, that has dynamic logic, that tries to mimic the type of interview that you or somebody in an intake center who is trained in adaptive, empathetic elicitation, that kind of a conversation. So the more we can do to make our different channels equal, right? The more we can do to push ourselves towards sort of channel agnosticism, the more likely we are to get more reports and better information for us to, close these things faster.
Yeah, and I encourage you, as you look at this, to not just look at the proportion. It's easy to look at this and say, hey, should we be having 19% of our reports come from the web form? And you can ask that question, and the answer is going to be, it depends. Really, you should be looking to make each of these channels as engaging and as adaptive as possible. The proportion might help you focus on an area and say, hey, we really want to get, our web reporting up or our proxy forms more involved or something like that. But really, I think pretty much every organization can make each of these channels incrementally better. And you should be looking at, not just the mix, but how can we make all of these better? Because part of what I love about this presentation and this graph is that if you make each of these better, the proportion could still stay the same, but your total number of reports, your total rate of reports would go up. So it's not just one or the other. You can make each of these better.
Yeah, and to that point, I think you have to ask yourself, how much is out there? Are you already running a 3.5 minute mile and there's really only 20 or 30 more seconds that you can improve it? Or are you running a 20-minute mile and there's 10 or 15 or 20, 15 different minutes or 15 minutes that you could shave off of it? Think about your reporting rate in the context of how many likely reports are out there. There are reports that say 65% of people witness wrongdoing. You can start with that number. That's 65 reports per 100. You can say, that's too high, I'm going to cut that in half. Okay, fine, it's 37 reports per 100. Pick a number, and I guarantee you it's an order of magnitude above what you are experiencing right now. And just that thought experiment itself is helpful, and it leads into this thing, because we have to visualize what the promised land looks like. We have to set a vision for what our future state is if we're ever going to achieve it. If we don't take time to figure out what we want our program to look like, or how we want to be perceived, or how we want people to think about ethics and compliance, on a frontline level, well, we're going to kind of get what we get. We're going to kind of drift through the ocean and get carried by whatever currents we're subject to. If you can think about a compliance 3.0 kind of a program, this is an ideal. This is the perfection that we're trying to strive toward, where we're more proactive. We're not coming in to fight a fire. We're doing fire prevention. We're viewed as this strategic lever and this trusted advisor in our organization. People in the organization understand all the hard work that ethics and compliance does, and they appreciate the controls that are put in place and the protections that are put in place on their behalf to make this culture of integrity authentic. So spending time thinking about the future and crafting that vision for your program, for your organization, for your team, for a particular aspect, or even a particular metric that you want to work on, is like literally the first step you need to launch you on that path of improvement. So think about that. Spend time, daydreaming. Okay, make a vision.
Yeah, and as we're talking about improvement, everyone drop in the chat how fast you can run a mile in. Who's running the 3.5 minute mile?
Yeah, do that. Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, issue categories is our last one for the review. I'm going to blast through this really quickly. We saw some interesting movements last year. We saw a 2% drop in HR issues. We saw also a drop in environmental health and safety. I think that was kind of tail end of COVID stuff that was still kind of trickling out in the prior year. And then we saw offsets in a couple of different categories. And I think this is kind of interesting. You know, we talk about this a lot, this recency effect or this headline effect and so forth. As, you know, as COVID was going, we saw environmental health and safety category spike. Last year in 2020, well, whatever, like last year's report, looking at 2022, there was so much InfoSec and privacy things that were in the headlines, and we saw a pop there. This year, last year, we've seen this, tough economy, this inflation thing, and look what we've seen increases in. We've seen increases in business quality, cutting corners. We've seen increases in compliance stuff, discrimination and harassment, tough environments, people are in their backup style, and fraud, theft, and property damage. Look at this. HR dropped by 1.7, fraud, theft, and property damage went up by 1.7. So the point is, couple of points. So one point is you need to be able to look at your categories and figure out what's going on and come up with some kind of a coherent, credible story about what's driving those fluctuations. If you can't come up with those stories off the top of your head, that's a first place to look in order to assess what might need to be done. Is there an actual problem? Is there something that needs to be fixed, right? So Gio, talk to me a little bit about categories and where you think people get it right and how you get it wrong. And as he's answering, I'd love to hear in the chat, how do you guys think about categories? Do you, what is the biggest pain point with categories for you? How have you found a good way to leverage those to, again, drive more insights, drive more messaging, and drive more impact?
Yeah, so we found that this can be a really powerful driver of not only the performance of your system, but the quality of your reporting and analytics. And we find that when people come onto our ecosystem and we invite them to reconsider how they're, organizing their categories, that it can drive a lot of really cool insights. So generally, there's a decision to make about how many categories do you have and which categories do you choose? So you don't want too many, right? If you have too many, if you have 67 different categories, then no one's going to go through them and pick them. And you don't want too few, because if you have too few categories, you're not going to really be able to pick that apart and figure out what's going on. So you want to optimize that taxonomy, that way that you organize and split up your reports to enhance your data quality. And we encourage you to think about, maybe do a refresh on this and say, hey, you know what? We've had the same 6 categories for the past 7 years. What's going on in those? And there are 2 things that, as you think about how do I optimize my reporting by optimizing my categories, that I encourage you to think about. And one is to look at your reports, and how many reports do you have in which categories, and maybe break those down into subcategories if you can. So, where do you have a critical mass of reports to say, hey, you know what, we should really split this one out into a few. But then also think about how do you kind of add a variable for the riskiness or the importance of those. Because you might, for example, have a relatively small proportion of harassment reports that, without looking at risk, you'd say, okay, let's group that into somewhere else. But you say, hey, you know what? That's a really important category. A lot of those are high severity. A lot of those are really, sticky, thorny issues that we need to pull through. And even though it's a small proportion, we want to be able to look at that itself. So the big takeaway is to think about how you want to be able to report this in a quarter or a year, and think about changing your category taxonomy to enable you to quickly and easily see your risk stance by looking at a summary of report count or days open or anonymity or something else. Look at those other metrics cut against your different categories.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to do in the category department. I don't want to beat the dead horse here, but you can really let these categories work for you. Just picture this kind of flywheel where your categories tie to your code has related trainings. Well, if I see a violation in this area, my corrective action can be consistently applied with reinforced training or perhaps changing a policy because it's unclear or whatever. You can create that sort of data connection yourself, even if your all-in-one tool or whatever platform you're on doesn't give you that functionality that you think you had. You can make this stuff work for yourself by connecting those things and kind of architecting a data connection. So I'm going to keep moving though. Let's get into some of the new stuff. So here is issue severity. Okay. So Gio, walk us through issue severity and tell us what the biggest takeaways are here from your perspective.
Yeah. So generally we're going to be splitting these severities between kind of regular, your kind of run-of-the-mill things, relatively severe, and urgent and severe. And this is a great way not only to get data out of it, right? You can do that same thing in categories and say, hey, how should I define these different tiers of severity to get me good reporting on the back end? But also you should have something in your system, because if you're on MySim and on the ecosystem you should have things in eyes, your intake, your routing and assignment of these issues, the specific way that you drive investigation based on severity. And when you get your severity definition right, that can push into your intake and find ways that you can find things out during intake that can help you assign severity to something. And then you can also drive things in your, your follow-up, your coordinator work and your investigations issues.
Yep, perfect. There was a question from Penny. Hey, Penny, do you have suggestions on categories? If you don't have anywhere to start, I would start with your code and map your categories in your case management to your code just as a starting point. Another alternative would be to map it to policies, depending on how your policy structure is organized. Maybe, if you have 1,000 policies, obviously that doesn't make sense. But think about kind of parent groups of those policies as well. Just think about how you can connect some of these different pieces of your compliance stool or your compliance table, whether it's policy, training, speak up, whatever. Hope that helped. Great point on the issue severity. Let's dive into the industries. So as you would expect, healthcare had about 16% of their severities, or 16% of their reports were severe reports, split kind of 60-40, 55-45 between non-urgent, that's the purple, and the actual urgent issues that are impending urgent things at 7%. Across, it's pretty much what you would expect. Interestingly, severity seems to sort of correlate with like overall, risk of an industry. So something like utilities, and I'm talking about risk from like an investment perspective. So I'm not going to nerd out on this too much. I'm holding myself back, but utilities don't fluctuate a lot like in the market. And so their operations are sort of more stable. Healthcare, finance, things like that tend to fluctuate a lot more with market trends. And that's because those are inherently sort of more risk. There's less sort of stability in those businesses. And it's interesting to see that show up across the issues that are coming out of these businesses. So when we're talking about severities, if you're looking at your severity rate and it's materially different from something you might see here, your industry, like I just showed on the last slide here, I think it's important to think about why, right? We're kind of scientists, we're investigators, we're trying to figure out how the world works and how these different machines that we're responsible for work. So if your severity rate is really high, I would say you want to look at 3 different things in this order. You want to first look at, like, what's the purpose of my intake channel? Right? Like if this is only for like if this is just an emergency line, well, then I would expect a disproportionate, number of those reports to be emergencies and high severities. If it's a general purpose line, well, then now we need to kind of keep looking, forward. If this is just, wow, these are for all kinds of reports and we have a disproportionate number of severities, the next thing to look at is look at my severity definitions. Are the criteria that determine whether something is a level 1 severity or a level 2 severity, are those dialed in, and are those indicative of how you would look at it if you were setting it up, today? Someone said in the chat here, I've already lost it, but they said, modifying and monitoring and optimizing your categories is key to data quality and data hygiene and data accuracy. And I think that's right. And I think many of us treat our case management and treat our investigation apparatus, and I'm not throwing stones here, I get it, we're overloaded, we have a bunch of stuff to do, but we treat them like we treat our 401k. We set it and we just kind of forget it. But going back and looking at these severity criteria or the categories to that comment can do a lot to unearth a sort of systemic problem that's showing up, that's being indicated in the data. So now, okay, fine, I've gotten my channel dialed in, I have my severity criteria dialed in, then it really kind of moves into this mode of, well, there must be actual, like, these are all valid severities. I've sort of substantiated this count of severities. These are truly severe. Well, now it's an opportunity for us to get that data to the right people, right? We in ethics and compliance have a branding problem generally that has been accumulated over the last 2 decades, right? For us to pivot into this 3.0 where we are this trusted advisor, we need to turn some light bulbs on and reframe how we're viewed in the organization. One great way to do that is by providing value. One great way we can provide value is by giving access to information that we only have access to, right? There's a ton of, there's many pools of data and there's many risk intelligence data points that we gain access to that can help other folks in the organization. So to the extent that you have all these severities and you've ruled out these first two, these first two things to look at, there might be an actual operational issue. And that's a great opportunity for you to get that information to the right people so that they can make those changes. Okay, so I just went through that. I should have been changing the slides. I'm so sorry. So when it comes down to issue severity, think about how you create your severity criteria and think of how you can leverage your intake either systematically or programmatically or just through directions and directives to your partner to make sure that those things are getting to the right people in the right amount of time. Training folks on ratings, whether that's managers, giving them a little guide that shows them stuff in this category, err on the side of high severity, right? Give the guidance that you need and make sure that people have the information you want them to have so that they can look at the world in the way that they should, the way you tell them to, okay? Expediting those high severity cases is super critical. One of the worst things that we can do, like I've heard these stories a bunch. You're just working through your list and then you find like a real hot boy down here and you're like, oh my gosh, I should have, I wish I knew about this burning fire sooner, right? Anything we can do to flag those high severity things faster and push those to the right people, that not only helps us to actually de-risk faster, it again shows our value to the rest of the organization and shows our commitment to the team that we're on. So the whole key here is to properly utilize your severity ratings so that the highest risk issues receive the appropriate attention fastest. And that can be some work on, how your system works, how your intake works, the questions that are asked, and the way those things are, routed, ideally automatically to the right parties. Anything to add on severity, G?
No, I think we covered it. I think you just need to be building your system so that you not only identify severity up front, but also that you have process adherence after that to follow up on those in the way that you would want to. There's a lot of things that you can't see right away, and your system, your platform, your software, and your team and processes should be allowing your team to focus on those high severity things in the right way.
Yeah,
I said no, and then I added something, so I guess I did have something.
Yeah, we got to make this stuff work for us, right? Like we're responsible for this thing. We're responsible for the ethics and compliance program. And it's on us to make sure that the program works. It's on us to make sure that those gears mesh. It's on us to drive that influence at the manager level and on the frontline level so that with this whole kind of flywheel and this circulatory system, the respiration of information back and forth can actually work. Great question in the chat here. We're starting to get some responses to, so go ahead and drop in your answer. But Angela just asked at 1224, I'm curious how many people have an inclusive hotline versus a separate reporting mechanism for HR versus compliance. We have seen people move to a kind of a single source of truth and then connect out because all these systems should connect with each other now. So I'd love to hear what folks are answering, and let's keep going. Gio, jump into substantiation and tell us what's important here.
Yeah, so let's talk first about what your level of substantiation is telling you about your program. Among other things, it's going to be telling you which of my issues did I find out enough about to substantiate, what kind of issues are being reported, and what kind of detail am I getting that's going to allow me to substantiate it. There's some reality that there's some reality about how many of your reports, how many of the things that are reporting are actual issues versus, a false alarm or someone didn't really understand what technical fraud is. But there are a lot of steps between what's actually happening and what you're substantiating. For example, if you don't get a lot of information and someone's anonymous and you can't follow up with them, it might be a real issue that's hard for you to substantiate and you can't come to a conclusion even though it's a real issue. And there's also a challenge or a risk here that you might have a high substantiation rate, and that could actually be working against you because you actually want to be finding out about a material amount of issues that people are bringing to you and saying, right, hey, I think this might be an issue. Can you look into it? And, your general narrative around that, if you were talking to that reporter, is hey, we looked into it, we didn't substantiate it because technically this isn't the problem that you thought it was, but we really appreciate you speaking up because generally, I think as E&C pros, we don't want to just rely on people to only tell us about the obviously really bad things. We want to be engaged in the conversation, and we want to be checking. We should be checking some things and say, hey, thank goodness that isn't a real problem, but I'm glad we looked at it. And you want to be getting that information. So over time here, we see in the Ethico bars that the substantiation rate is rising. Going from 37 to 47%, and we're seeing that the that anonymous rate is also affecting this over time. So we're seeing that in 2023.
I think this is mislabeled. Sorry to go ahead and jump in here. So the dark blue is our substantiation rate, and that has dropped. We saw it drop kind of precipitously during COVID, and this is one of these weird metrics that hasn't bounced back. We've seen a reversion to kind of historical levels across several of these other metrics, but substantiation seems to be kind of lagging. And so I'd love to hear in the chat from folks, both actually. I'd love to hear how you think about substantiation. What's your biggest frustration with it? What do you think your substantiation rate is, and where do you wish it could be, and like what do you think the max of it is? I just want to hear kind of what our big frustrations are with substantiation. And then I'd also like to hear if you've seen a similar trend like this, where you maybe had a higher substantiation rate prior to COVID, and then now sort of as we're coming out of that sort of little chapter, that it hasn't reverted back. We have seen in the data that the substantiation rate drop is partially due to the churn that has happened within our organizations, right? Over the last 18 and 24 months, there has been about a 15 to 25% turnover of employees on average across industries. And that's a significant amount, a significant level of new population in the organization that perhaps didn't get exposed to that training. And now they're kind of coming into this different environment where, some of those awareness materials or some of the ways that we interact with the workforce haven't been updated. So that churn that a lot of organizations have been fighting with, kind of disengagement and the Great Resignation and stuff like that. So some of that is going to be driving this, and there are things that we can do to drive better substantiation. And shout out to Hannah for jumping in here. I think this is a great way to highlight what can drive from this. Is there are going to be times where you don't substantiate an issue, right? The concern or the accusation was not actually kind of fully, completely that thing, but there's still something to do to follow up on that case and do some remediation, be that training or working with employees or reinforcing some of your principles. And that's a great thing to do. And we're seeing more and more people in our ecosystem use our corrective action plan framework to say, hey, we're closing this case. We've done our work. We're done with it. It's maybe substantiated or not. And here's the work that we have to do after that. And over time, wherever you are with your system and how much software you've adopted and how much efficiency you're getting from automation, you should be finding ways to do more and more of your work and your team's work in a software platform that's going to allow you to report and track on it and get those things out of brains and inboxes and spreadsheets into a system. And it's a great point. Thanks for bringing it up, Hannah. You're pushing forward in your improvement if you're noting that, hey, there's probably still some remediation, still some actions we can take after the case is closed, regardless of whether it's substantiated. And when you're thinking about substantiation rate, you got to ask yourself kind of like, well, what's the point of substantiation rate? Of course, we want it higher, but like to what end? What is that indicating to us? What comfort is that giving us? And there's a couple of interesting comments in the chat, and they're saying basically what I was going to say. So good job reading my mind, guys. So Don said, rather than substantiation rate, we are more interested in whether the report and investigation resulted in recommendations for improvement or corrective action. We're shifting to this metric. And I think that's right. Like that allows you to take some action that is like that metric is in your control to a greater degree than a substantiation where you have a layer of anonymous reports, you have a layer of perhaps data quality, you have a bigger opportunity for nothing to happen. When you shift to a kind of forward-looking higher agency corrective action plan based approach, those metrics are going to be a lot more meaningful to Don's point. And then coming right on Don's heels, you got Charles coming in here. Hey, Charles, substantiation does not tell the whole story. There may be concerns that can't be substantiated based on facts and evidence, but there is a real smoke growing. So again, with this kind of shift to the forward-looking corrective action plan approach, that allows you to, again, take action, aggregate data around a potential, is this smoke for a fire that's coming later, versus, again, relying on sort of the relatively lower agency data point that is substantiation. So interesting. So Jazz, thank you so much. How's it going, Jazz? Jazz said substantiation for 23 was 43% versus 52 in 2022, and anonymity was up 8% in 2023. So there's stuff going on in our organizations. We're not walking across a static plane. This ground is moving. There's regulations changing. There's trade winds blowing, right? Like there's animal spirits that are kind of causing changes in our market. And so looking for these changes and re-asking yourself that question, or bringing that beginner's mind to your process, stepping out of reality for a second and looking at some of these metrics can really uncover some ideas like what Don just shared, shifting to a new metric, right? What Charles just shared. Hey, this doesn't really tell the whole story. So issue substantiation, let's kind of double click on these numbers. As you would expect, as time goes on, substantiation rate goes down. Not by a terribly significant amount, it's about 10 points, but many times some of these more complex cases, you're just not able to substantiate for a number of reasons. Also, interestingly, I don't think this is that surprising. In the bottom right corner, it shows you substantiation rate across reporter types: employee, customer or related party, and vendor contractor. And what you would expect is kind of happening. Let me kind of explain what's going on here. So let's look at vendor contractor. Vendor contractor reporting something, their anonymity rate is always super low, and they're usually talking about something specific. They're not saying something vague about someone said something rude to me in the hallway or someone used my sriracha, right? If it's hitting the reporting line, it's probably a real issue, and it probably has a higher identified rate. For customer/related parties, these are stakeholders that are a little bit outside the organization. So while anonymous rate is not a big factor here, many times they're harder to substantiate because they don't have all the details, they don't have all the context, they're not giving the information necessary for the investigator who has a lower odds of like following up with these related parties if they need to substantiate that. And then you have sort of employees in the middle, where you get the mix of context and information and the mix of fear of retaliation and willingness to be identified and so forth. So look at again, cut these things a couple of different ways. I don't know how much you guys use pivot tables. I am like a pivot table fiend. Okay, that's why I'm always wearing sleeves. I got track marks up and down my arm from my pivot table addiction. There's so many new cuts you can make by just dropping in another field. If that would be valuable to do a pivot table session in the Ethicsverse, I'm happy to do it. But it's a very powerful tool where you can drop in one extra metric and see like, wow, these totally swing when I look at employees versus vendors. So getting intimate with your data and understanding how these things move can really unlock a lot of insights and a lot of new ways for you to, again, unlock more value in your program. So looking at your substantiation rate from year over year, what's going to drive that? You have to take the scientific approach. If perhaps that's what Jazz is doing right now. What went up? What caused my anonymity rate to go up 8%? Is there something connected in there or is there a correlation in another metric, another category that can lead me down the path of investigation and of discovery to figure out what's going on? Where can you improve your investigation process, and where can you provide better information to potential reporters about what you need to do your job? Right? Help them help you. Hey, I need this information. We really want to hit a substantiation rate of 70%. In order for that to happen, we need to know X, Y, Z. Who, what, when, where, why. Ideally, you would feel, the protections in place, and you would be identified, whatever those things are that you need. You have to set that vision. You have to provide that information to folks, because there's a ton of new people in your organization. Most of them have not engaged in the reporting process. And so we need to kind of clear away the brush, so to speak, to let them kind of run a little bit faster. Gio, what would you tell us about your favorite substantiation tips?
Yeah, so I would just encourage you that, that slide that we were showing a few different cuts across timing and source is something that you should use to consider how those cuts within your organization are going to make sense. And probably a custom benchmark is going to give you better data than this overall benchmark report, because so many different things could feed into this. And I would kind of look at the bookends of this. because you might look at, you might start by saying, hey, you know what, maybe our investigations are not being as effective because maybe that's where we should look. It might be there, but it might be on the other end of your process. It might be in how you do intake and what information you're getting, or it might be even before that in the stance and the mood and the culture that you have with employees, and how well they understand what's going to be important for you to be able to investigate it, and how well they understand like what should be reported. So I think this is a really rich topic of substantiation. There are a bunch of things that this can lead you to, but also that richness can make this complicated to just get a quick assignment by just doing a single calculation. So I'd encourage you guys to do some of these things, clarify policy expectations, review what is unsubstantiated, and look for clues. And also, as scientists, we need to be okay going with a hypothesis that is not already proven out in the data. So you might have some anecdotes, or you might have just a hunch or a gut feeling that, hey, maybe we should check this out, and that's okay. It's okay to be a leader in your organization and say, hey, we're going to do some work on this. I'm not completely sure that this is going to bear fruit, but we're going to check into this and see if this helps some things, because that's part of how you're going to learn. And that might lead you into a cycle of collecting some more data and figuring out if it's there or not. There's a lot you can get out of substantiation, but it's also very nuanced.
And remember that your value is not that nothing goes wrong. Like, there's always going to be problems. Your value is in your ability to fix those kinds of problems. So uncovering, more problems, that's what I want. I want problems always. I only want problems. Okay. I want all problems. That's it.
This guy eats emojis and problems. He makes problems for breakfast and emojis for lunch during Ethicsverse.
Exactly. So the key for substantiation is really focusing on good investigations, providing the right insights or the right guidance and clarity to reporters that can help them give you better information to drive sound conclusions. Using your case management systems to ensure a consistent process is applied across investigators, that the right conclusions are met, and a consistent application of corrective actions at the end of that investigation can really dial in your process, really demonstrate your effectiveness, wink, wink, and also give you those insights that can really de-risk your organization. Okay.
All right, so we got 4 left and 14 minutes. So let's roll through these. So reporter types, I would encourage you to take a similar approach to what we talked about in categories and figure out how you define and how what buckets you want to pick for your reporter types. It seems pretty apparent to me that the biggest engagement in your speak up culture is going to be coming from employees, but you also want to consider how you're making this available and driving awareness in some of these other categories, and see how that changes over time. And, you might say, looking on the right bar here, you might say, hey, you know what? Our vendor rate is above this. We're at 4 or 5%, but I'd love to get more engagement there, because I think, and I have some reason to believe that getting even better engagement from our vendors and contractors will help us. But this is going to be very different across your industry and your business type, and how engaged these other parties are in your process. Let's go to the next slide and get some rich data here. Go ahead, Nick.
All right. Yeah, I was just going to say, it was interesting to see that explosion in related party kind of during COVID, and how that has persisted as well. That bar, that dark blue part of the bar, that has not collapsed back to the pre-COVID levels. So either people are more, willing to advocate on behalf of, somebody within the organization, related party, whatever, or organizations are figuring out that is a valid data source for risk intelligence, and they're attempting to get more of that. But that's an interesting trend.
Yeah, so this is one interesting way that you can cut your data. This is one of the things that you can do with a pivot table and say, hey, I don't want just a summary by one metric of reporter type. I want to see reporter type against, my the categories, or I want to see reporter type against substantiation. And here we're showing it across industries. So you can look here to get some better indications of how this might look different for your industry and for your peers. We encourage you to think about how seeing, this kind of 2-dimensional data set can help you. And as we get into kind of what to think about and how to apply this, If you're not in the chat, you got to jump into it. There's a great conversation going on around awareness and how you drive awareness. And our last category and this reporter type can both be helped by driving awareness. If you want to get more involvement from your customers or related parties or your vendors, there are some things you can do on an awareness front to drive engagement there. So jump in the chat and share the learning with your peers, because that's what we do in compliance and ethics. We help our employees, we help our companies, and we help each other.
So when I'd love to also hear in the chat, how do you think about some of these sort of non-core reporters? And what are you doing to get more reports from them, whether that's vendors or related parties? That's a really great area to get some good input that's not really as affected with the sort of cultural dynamics, local dynamics within an organization that an employee would. So think about what type of employee or what type of stakeholders would be able to witness potential misconduct, right? How can we get more stuff from those folks? When you're looking to establish relations with customers or the community, what trends do you want to see across reporter types, and how can awareness be heightened in those areas? That's part of the conversation that's happening in the chat. Hopefully you can jump into that. But let's talk about some real reporter type optimization tips. Where am I at here? Here we go. Okay, so who do you want to hear from? We just kind of talked about that. How can you tune your verbiage to make sure that it accounts for these different folks? And how can you, again, provide that type of clarity? In terms of tailoring communication to your employees, again, don't forget your job. Half of your job, maybe 80% of your job is influence. We have to influence people to participate. They're voluntary participants in our Speak Up program. So how can we tailor communication to employees to help them be advocates for that, to tell a vendor to speak up or a related party to speak up? But how can we give them that clarity for their role-specific position? And how can you, again, educate related parties? Some folks have put on their form little verbiage, depending on what type of person is reporting, whether it's a related party or a vendor, to, again, ensure that they're getting better information. The more prep work you can do, the more you can do on the front end, it really can set you up for success on the back end. Did I mention it's Chase's birthday? Round of applause for Chase, you guys.
Chase of Spades coming at him. Listen, we all know. Yeah, we all know that compliance is culture, and that culture is about communication and leadership. So you got to consider your communication channels and where are vendors engaging with you. Maybe they're not seeing your code of conduct very frequently, and they're not going to your compliance portal a lot, but they're signing in at each of your facilities. So there's communication happening there, and whether it's role-specific examples or how to do communication and engagement and awareness, or even just improving your reporting channels, making sure that your web form is easy to find and easy to use. These are all ways that we communicate and influence. And a huge key, if you're trying to drive more engagement across your entire program or with a specific reporter type, is meeting people where they are. Like Nick was just saying, these are voluntary participants in our risk and compliance and ethics programs. So the best thing you can do is make it easy for them and meet them where they are, and engage with them where they're already engaging with your company. Be that in a physical space, be that in the emails that they get, or other digital communication channels.
All right, so abandonment rate. This is a kind of a side metric that we put in here. This is something that we spend a lot of time on, a lot of effort on getting right. Our organization was built by compliance consultants to the healthcare industry, built on kind of high quality and doing the job right. How would they want that job to be done? And what we've seen is that people are 8x more likely to stay on the phone if they're answered by a human being. So think about the anxiety. Think about the emotional state of somebody who's seen some wrongdoing. It's keeping them up at night. They pull into the parking garage during lunch to make this call, and they're finally going to speak up about this thing that's been driving them nuts, and they're met with Muzak. We're met with careless whisper and a disembodied voice telling them how important the phone, their call is to us, and then they get raced off the phone, asked 5 questions, and that's it. Those people, if they're sitting on the phone too long, they're going to jump off the hook, right? We got to reel in every single fish that comes on our hook, and our abandonment rate is this silent killer that most of us don't think about. So I would encourage everybody to test your line and see if that experience is what you want somebody who's feeling like I just described to experience. If it's not, and if that's not going to make that person an ethics and compliance evangelist, start thinking about what you can do to improve that, right? We have kept for the last 18 plus months our abandonment rate below the weekly abandonment rate below 1%, and we staff up for that because there's 65 reports. We're getting like 3 or 4. So like we got to get all we can from those 3 or 4 if we're ever going to start getting more and more orders of magnitude of risk intelligence, right? Like we have to get these human to human pieces correct. If we don't get them right, well, then word is going to spread and we're going to be just kind of stuck in this compliance 2.0 thing forever, where we're just focused on efficiency and we feel like a cost center and we can't speak up and we're in reactionary mode and we're just, bailing water out of our ship. We need to do a seismic shift in how we, administrate our programs. And that's going to come down to us focusing on the things that matter most. And what matters most is people's engagement, people's participation, and building this authentic culture of integrity. That's how we get these positive externalities of, business outperformance that's actually sustainable. Anything you want to add here, Gio, to the abandonment rate?
Yeah, I would just reinforce that the abandoned calls or abandoned engagement in your program is probably one of the costliest errors in your compliance program, because those are people that they're hitting on all of these things. They understand what's going on. They feel safe. They're not worried. They're not as worried about retaliation. They understand, they're aware of where they can report and they've jumped in. And then at the last mile, at the last minute, you lose them because the system that you've hired to, handle those calls or handle that engagement is not giving them the respect they deserve. So this can be a place of really big engagement and improvement in your program if you're, trending at that 10+% abandonment rate.
Where are we at? Oh, I clicked on the wrong slide. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I think we're going into 8. I think we're going into reporter awareness.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so I can start talking about it as we get there.
Do.
So you want to be looking at your program, and you should start by saying, hey, what are the main channels that I'm communicating our speak up culture on, right? It certainly should be in your code of conduct, but is it is it going out in email campaigns? Do you have printed materials? This is a big one. Are people able to just Google, company name, compliance reporting hotline and find it? Because we've seen more and more of participants not going to the formal, intranet and the formal internal site and just, maybe looking it up on their phone or just Googling it. So you want to kind of do an audit and say, hey, where could people find out or be reminded of or find the URL or find the phone number? And then with those, you want to look at your quality of those. And one way to assess that is comparing your incidence of where people find out about this across these different channels. So on this next one, you're going to see that same cut across industry. So we got to get going quickly here. So I won't camp out too much on this, but you might want to look at how your specific industry compares to your numbers here. So let's talk about tips, right? How are you going to kind of think about this reporter awareness? So, think about, if you had, I think every cross-section of our population is getting more digitally aware and digitally involved, but especially if you have kind of a digitally native employee population, those traditionally and by statistics are more likely to be engaged and speak up. So you want to make sure that that segment of your population can find digital ways and web-based ways to find out how to report. And you should have an ethics portal that's easy to find and indexed on the web. And you want to look at how you can adapt your awareness strategy to something that is going to drive reporting in a hybrid or remote work environment. You want to make sure that people don't have to be in the office to find it, regardless of whether you have kind of an office first culture. People are thinking about this stuff when they're at home. People are thinking about this stuff when they're out of the office, and they should be able to find out how to report and jump into that. So you want to think about, your intranet hub, make sure that there's an internal website that has rich information that is specific for your employees. And, we talk a lot about the mood in the middle, right? You want to have the front line engaged, you want to have the tone at the top, but those manager discussions, how can you make it easy for a manager to say, hey, that's fine. I can spend 2 minutes on my, my team meeting this week saying, hey guys, we all care about this. Our culture is our competitive advantage and we want to have an ethical culture. Make sure you guys check out this stuff. If you've seen something, here's where you can go. those managers are a huge driver of the microcultures around your organization, and figure out how you can, make it easy. Give them a script, give them a meme, give them a video, and welcome them to be part of the change that we want to see in the world. And you want to make sure that all employees are aware of those reporting options. You want to make sure there's consistent visibility. And like we were talking about, you want to meet people where they are. And you want to have a multifaceted, both promotional and, hey, I think they're, both promotional, like tell them about it in the first place, remind them, and make it easy when they say, hey, you know what, I should probably check this out. Make it easy for them to find it. They shouldn't have to log in with their VPN and go into your HR site and find their code of conduct and then find it there. They should be able to find it as easy as possible.
Yeah, we got to meet guys where they're at. We got to meet folks where they are right now and make it easy. So we're kind of like a minute away from time. Hope you join us next week. We're going to have another great episode, because that's just what we try to do, great episodes every week. But we're going to keep going. We'll probably go another 3 or 4 minutes to wrap up issue sequence and, reiterate a couple things about reporting rate. If you got to go right now, don't worry. You can check the YouTube video out on your newly subscribed YouTube channel, Ethico. Okay, I'm sure you're all subscribed to it now. Thank you very much. And let's dive into issue sequence here. Okay, so issue sequence is all about what's my proportion, all the reports I got last year, how many of them are original issues and how many of those are follow-ups. Okay, so you can see that our original issue rate, or our follow-up rate, has dropped from about 17% to below 15% last year. And that has kind of coincided, interestingly enough, we did this retrain around 2020 of our entire team. All the supervisors got their CCEP, so they're all certified by the Compliance Certification Board. And we retrained everybody on this concept of empathetic elicitation. And we redoubled our efforts to say, okay, our anonymous, or our adaptive interview, that conversation needs to breathe. So if that takes 5 minutes, okay, fine. If it needs to take 15 minutes on average, well, then let's go ahead and honor that person who's making that, exhibiting that behavior we want. Make sure that they get their questions answered, and make sure that we get as much information as possible. So that's kind of coincided with that. And while it has increased a little bit from a follow-up perspective since coming out of COVID, it's still maintained pretty low and about half of what the status quo is. So how can you can see this in the actual report. I encourage you guys to download the real report or the full report. There's a full write-up and a bunch more kind of analysis and more tips and stuff in there. But if you're thinking about your issue sequence, like if you have too high of a follow-up rate, what is that due to? It's due to someone not getting their expectations managed, right? Someone made a report and they haven't heard anything, so they're calling back and they're calling back and calling back. Look, we all have that crazy person there. I said it, that crazy person who's going to do like 500 follow-ups. Like that happens. That's going to happen from time to time. But the average follow-up person is just somebody who's like trying to get that loop closed, right? So what we can do to really drive that follow-up rate down is not only provide clarity on the front end of how our process works and what they can expect and what follow-up they can expect, but it's also to make sure that like we're following back up with reporters after the fact. A lot of people don't do that, and and I get it, right? Like there's so much to do, and there's a massive list, and I got a lot to get through, and I have my pressures, and we have budget constraints and all those kinds of things. I understand that, but pausing for a quick second to thank that reporter, or during your investigation after that interview, managing their expectations and telling them what's coming next, or telling them, hey, if you don't hear from us in a month, please go ahead and follow up. All those things can do a lot, not just to affect this number, because kind of who cares about the number? We only care about the number to the extent that it is an indication or a picture of what's going on in the organization. And if a higher than benchmark number exists and you're not doing those follow-ups, I'm just telling you, do that and watch that thing drop in the next quarter. It's crazy how things move. Allowing for anonymous clarifications, again, by providing clarity to reporters on the front end, or potential reporters on the front end, that describe your process and describe the protections that you have in place, assuming you have a case management system that's modern and can allow you to have those kinds of communications. Put that in there. Put that in that guidance document, or put that in that guidance infographic that you put on your ethics portal, and that will also be a headwind to your follow-up rate. Go ahead, Gio.
Yeah, just, I think you want to try to envision your ideal scenario here. So I think, we generally want a follow-up or a re-engagement from a reporter if something new happens, and, they're so engaged that they want to provide the additional information that's going to help our investigation or substantiation. You don't want a type of follow-up that someone's like, hello, it's been crickets out here. I haven't heard from anybody, and I was expecting it. So you can handle that with expectations management up front, with
Right.
communication throughout the process, and having faster case closure times. But there are good and suboptimal follow-ups, and part of what you can do as you dig deeper into the data is look through those follow-ups and see how many of those are because people were expecting something different and we didn't deliver on the responsiveness and the clarity that they would like to see from our ethics and compliance program.
All right. Walk us through reporting rate, Gio, because here is really where I think we can keep score most readily. And here is where I think we have the biggest opportunity for improvement. Again, we're not saying, hey, let's 5x your work. No, let's increase our reporting rate and let's use technology in a smart way to focus our efforts and focus our unique skill set for more of our time on the things that matter most. That's what our game is. If we're spending all of this time doing manual work, well, we can never get to those wish list projects. We can never put as much of our unique skill set, to work as we would like. And it's hard to kind of move these things. But just keep in mind, our job is to get that risk intelligence and provide those insights back to those points of risk. And there are 50, 30, 20, many more multiples of more reports in your organization that can really move the needle.
Yes, you want to be looking at this over time, and you want to be getting more reports of more legitimate issues over time, and then you should also be able to handle those more efficiently by scaling through technology. So you can see here a comparison across company size. I think there's a reasonable story about a smaller company is going to have, higher engagement, or, a few bad things that happen are going to be, made more aware of. But, this is part of why you want to dig through layers of your benchmarking to make sure that you're comparing to the best, most accurate set of peers as possible. So let's talk about kind of what to think about here. So you want to think about how can you encourage speak up culture in your organization, right? Ideally, the ideal thing would be we don't have a lot of issues and we hear about all of them, right? So you want to be, defending against bad things happening and pushing forward on that perception, engagement, speak up culture front to try to get as much of what is actually happening reported. And like we were talking about earlier, maybe a little bit more, right? You would prefer that employees have their eyes on these things and say, hey, you might want to check on this, instead of just waiting until they're absolutely sure that there's a burning fire. That mood at the middle, engaging middle managers, that's going to have a huge impact on your reporting rate. And it's probably not a lot of effort to try to get a little bit of kind of echoing and reinforcement from those middle managers. And this third one is really probably the biggest thing in this whole system of speak up is how can you fight against retaliation? And just so you know, when I say retaliation, I'm talking about actual incidents of like physical in the real world retaliation and perceived retaliation, because both of those things are going to impact the perception and the culture of employees. If someone has a phantom perception that they will be retaliated against or that they were retaliated against, that is still an issue for you and your team. Even though, maybe no one would win a lawsuit against retaliation because it didn't actually happen, that's a compliance 1.0 mindset. And we want to be in this 3.0 actual effectiveness, and you drive actual effectiveness by speaking into the minds and the hearts of employees and addressing their concerns, not just the things that are going to land you in jail and you're going to lose the lawsuit about.
Right.
So part of that is promoting a culture of psychological safety. And you do those things like we've been talking about through communication and leadership and influence. Psychological safety is a perception thing. If someone feels like they're unsafe, if someone feels like this is risky or it's dangerous, then that's going to keep them from engaging. Even if you can say, I'm absolutely sure no retaliation ever happens. Even if that was true, I don't think that anyone can say that credibly. But even if that was true, someone thinking that, having a different opinion is going to keep them from reporting something. And that's the cycle that we want to push through. And you can do that by reporting channels, by communication, by, following up with reporters and being as transparent as possible, by celebrating those good outcomes, in a blinded way if needed, and showing that this whole thing actually works, and that you not only have an anti-retaliation policy, but you have an anti-retaliation culture where managers are trained about about these things. Your system is set up to protect anonymity and or confidentiality, and you're sharing those high-level statistics and rewarding reporting. So that can be small incentives of, a thank you or something like that. You can also reward reporting psychologically by giving people respect, by engaging with them as a human, by giving them whatever information you can to help them understand that what they just did was being part of the change that we all want to see in the world.
So the key here is, like Gio said, improve the communication, ensure easy access, provide that clarity, ultimately build that trust, and to recognize that there's 6 to 18 times, use whatever numbers you want. You're going to come to something like this. This is probably conservative. There's 6 to 18 times more reports in your organization than you're getting. There's a seismic shift that you can get to really break that dam and get the deluge of risk intelligence that exists in your organization. Okay, for the 200 plus of you that are still here, guess what you get? Little bonus, little birthday bonus time here. All right. So retaliation is a massive issue. It's a headwind to the risk intelligence that you need to do your job. So here are 5 quick tips to fight retaliation. Remember, 46 or 47% of people who spoke up last year faced actual retribution per the Ethics and Compliance Initiative. So how do we fight this? So even if your organization is twice as good as that average, that's still 1 in 4 people face some kind of retribution, some kind of retaliation. So that's going on in your organization. And don't forget about the ethical refugees, the people that left a toxic workplace. They're bringing that baggage into your organization. How can you turn them into a culture champion versus the apathy that they're likely to result to, or maybe even a culture detractor if that baggage and that jadedness is too much? Assume you have a retaliation problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, you assume you have a retaliation problem. And you can just do this as a thought exercise, or just understand that being in that mindset is going to help you make better decisions. You might say, I'm pretty sure we don't. I've looked into it and stuff like that. But if you're in the stance and in the mindset that there is a retaliation problem, then you're going to be vigilant about making sure that it isn't, and finding even small improvements to perception or actual retaliation.
You speak
so
up heroes. Yeah, go
ahead.
This is yours. I stole this idea from you, so you should probably.
Well, we're all heroes here. You speak up heroes in communication about anti-retaliation. So we as humans, right? If you want to get into psychology, we live and breathe and react to stories, right? Telling somebody some stats is going to convince some people, and it's going to get some people thinking about something. But sharing a story about an actual person, even if it's a cartoon avatar or a made-up name or something like that, sharing a story about this thing happened and we did this and we found out this and here's how it happened and everyone's better before it. Those stories convey a richness of information that is going to drive that influence and communication into your culture.
So ensure that those anonymous protections are in place, and ensure that people know that those protections are in place. If you polled your employee base, you would be shocked at the proportion who not only don't know how to report, but don't know that these protections that you've made investments in on their behalf even exist. Okay, so communicating that stuff does a lot to build trust. Carla just said this, so thank you, Carla. Following up with reporters down the road to check if any retaliation happened builds a ton of trust. Her comment at 111 said, I follow up 6 months after to address any potential retaliation and see if anything else has happened. It builds a lot of trust and confidence in the program. Absolutely. And guess what you're doing? You're just treating that person like a human being. That person is doing a favor. They're exhibiting the behaviors that we want, following up with them and making sure that they've been cared for, and that it hasn't sort of gone off the rails for them. To Carla's point, does build a ton of trust. And then finally, leveraging those middle managers to fight the fight. The more you have to say things 10 times, 10 ways. The more different people that are talking about this thing, the more credible it's going to become, and the higher the likelihood that those behaviors are going to shift. If you can activate some of those middle managers to talk about the company's, commitment to stamping out retaliation and how they don't want retaliation on their team, it's going to make people feel a lot more safe, and it's going to make them buy into that process a lot more. Okay.
And I just want to encourage everyone, we're talking about benchmark, we're talking about stats, we're talking about improvement. I want to encourage you, just like that mindset of assume you have a retaliation problem, I want to encourage you to conceive of your program in a way that you can handle twice as many issues, you can be twice as good, you can have twice as much engagement without working twice as hard or getting twice the team or getting twice the budget. And how are you going to do that? You're going to do that by engaging with your network, like we're talking about here, learning from your peers, staying subscribed to the Ethicsverse and learning how to be better, and building solutions into your software. Whether we're talking about following up with reporters, you can do that through your software and automate those reminders or that engagement through an email. You want to make sure you're following up. That doesn't have to just be hanging over your head every 6 months. Hey, did I get it done? You can set reminders, have that be part of your follow-up and your corrective action plan, and let your vendors, let your platform, let your software work for you. And that's how you can be twice as good without working twice as hard.
That's the kind of work I like. Twice as good without twice as hard. Okay, so thank you guys all for staying. Hope you guys enjoyed the session. Hope you found some value in it. If you're interested in the benchmark, custom benchmark report, please go ahead and drop that one in the chat. Again, reminder, if you want to be part of our, advisory committee to see how we can improve this thing and how we can really make the Ethicsverse 10 times better than it is right now, drop that 0 in the chat. Download the benchmark report and reach out to us for all of your ethics and compliance needs. And if not, we'll see you next week regardless. All right. Next week, we've got another great episode. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Happy birthday to Chase. One more round of applause for the Chase of Spades, my guy. All right. See you guys next week. Take it easy.